Well, good afternoon or good evening, everybody, and welcome to this webinar, Biofinity Toric Multifocal. I'm Joe Tanner from Cooper Vision Professional Services, and I'm co-presenting the material this afternoon with my colleague Julia Kwok, or Jules. So I wanted to start by thanking everyone for making it along and giving us your time. We really appreciate that, and we've had a really good response to the 3 sessions. This is the third of 3. My thanks again for your support and coming to hear about this very interesting product. Not every day that somebody launches a toric multifocal, as I'm sure you appreciate. So let's jump into the presentation. So as a starting point, as we know, astigmatic presbyopes present certain challenges, but really contact lens patients, as they become presbyopic, present certain challenges, don't they? And we have really, with the first mass fitting of contact lens wearers starting in the 1980s and 90s, we have quite a few of them now who've been contact lens wearers like me for 2 or 3 decades, and they've reached that stage. And as we know, you know what the options are, but they all bring with them compromises, as does presbyopia generally, I suppose. We may add overreaders, I guess, to their contact lens wear, but that may not be a particularly attractive option to them, and obviously there's some inconvenience coming there. The ultimate sacrifice for them, I suppose, is to stop contact lens wear. Great news if you're a spectral lens company, terrible news if you're a contact lens company. But really, if the patient's still a motivated contact lens wearer, we want to try to keep them in something on their corneas. So monovision, of course, as we know, is something of a useful short-term solution, but to the extent that it really only tides us over for a few years. And as that ad grows up to perhaps 150 or so, the stereo acuity and the binocular vision generally starts to become affected. So that's not really the ideal prognosis for most patients, we would think. And of course, there are some multifocal toric contact lenses out there. Our ProClear multifocal toric we'll mention quite a few times during this presentation. But of course, a complicated product, seemingly. And therefore also more difficult to manufacture. And one of the things that you'll learn as we go through the presentation is some of the improvements we've made to our manufacturing process, which means that you can have even more confidence in this particular product. So as the name would suggest, what we've done is we've taken our Biofinity toric design, which has been well proven and has become clearly the most successful product of its type across Australia, New Zealand, indeed around the world in the 10 years or so since it's been launched. And we've combined that with the optics of our Biofinity multifocal. And of course, we're also using our silicon hydrogel platform. So we've got these 3 technologies wrapped up together. And of course, keeping astigmats and contact lenses is something we want to do as they become presbyopic. But I think really what this product is about, and another one of the themes that we'd like to keep in the front of your mind as we talk about this product, is that it's really a surprisingly significant opportunity to build a significantly larger base of contact lens wearers if you go looking for them. If you're an Australian optometrist collecting CPD points, these are the learning objectives that we're obliged to share with you. So a couple of the key elements that we're bringing out here, of course, are the design, the specifications, and how to fit the lens. Looking at the topics we wish to cover during this webinar, we're going to do some polling to begin with. We find that warms people up, but it's always useful when we're talking about presbyopes and contact lenses to ask 2 or 3 questions. We'll ask you 3, and share colleagues' approach to certain situations or their attitudes with certain situations around this whole subject of presbyopes wearing contact lenses. I'll talk some more about that market opportunity or the opportunity this product affords you and review the specifications of the lens before I hand across to Jules, who's going to take you through what's special about our material technology, our Biofinity material or Aquaform technology. She'll pass it back to me, and I'll review the design technologies we've incorporated to this lens before Jules will pick up on really probably the most critical part of the presentation, the fitting process. It's pretty straightforward if you follow the steps. and there's some really important tips and tricks that I know Jules will share with you there. I'll touch on some elements of the clinical performance of the lens that we've gleaned from some studies that we've been carrying out in recent times, and there should be time at the end for your questions that we will endeavour to answer. So save them up. You've also got the option of communicating with us through those Q&A or chat panels. So as well as Jules and myself, I've got several colleagues here behind the scenes, making sure everything works well, and they'll be monitoring questions and so on. So feel free to interact with us. That's one of the advantages of this modality. So in terms of polling, let's move into the first question. And that question is, what proportion of presbyope or presbyopic spectacle wearers do you believe would benefit from wearing contact lenses at least once a week? So just think about your typical everyday presbyope who's not a contact lens wearer, and think about all of those roaming around your practice, and how many of them do you think would genuinely benefit if they wore contact lenses, you know, at least once a week. Some of them might wear them more than that, but we're just trying to get a flavour of how attractive you think contact lens wear, or how beneficial it could be for this population. So just choose one of the options there, just 5 buckets, fewer than 10%, going all the way up to most of them, and we'll see how that comes out. Done this a few times over the years. Tends to be fairly consistent result. And up comes the result here. I see 40 of you didn't answer. Don't be shy, it doesn't hurt. If you're on it's a bit easier to do this on a laptop or a desktop computer, but if you are using a tablet or a phone, it's possible. You just need to tap a couple of times. But what we're seeing there is pretty typical. Usually, you know, we're getting something like half of you believe that half of the patients would benefit. You know, percentages perhaps don't matter so much. It's just that general principle that many optometrists believe quite a lot of presbyopes would benefit from using contact lenses some of the time. Of course, the reality is the vast majority of presbyopes are non-contact lens wearers and remain that way. Let's have a look at question 2. And that's coming to the issue of if there are any clinical reasons that you feel hold you back from fitting more presbyopes with contact lenses, what would be the main one? We've listed 3 and then a bucket D, something else. But so unsatisfactory visual acuity, handling difficulties, dryness perhaps, dryness issues. Does that hold you back more than the other things? Or is it indeed something else that we didn't think of? So this is another question that I remember asking this about 10 years ago now, because we had this little spurt of launching multifocal contact lenses, Biofinity multifocal 2011, and then ProClear one-day multifocal 2012. So we did a lot of polling around that. So it's interesting to see if that's changed, and it hasn't. So unsatisfactory visual acuity, and that's really quite opposite to what we're talking about today, because you know, a lot of effort's gone into producing a toric multifocal lens for you that really is going to give you your best chance yet of giving these patients the best possible visual result. And the third final poll question is, generally speaking, I know there are always complexity to this, but what's your preferred contact lens option for managing presbyopes? Is it multifocal contact lenses? Do you prefer to stick with single vision contact lenses and then perhaps have overreaders or something else to help them? Or do you generally rely on the monovision approach? Or indeed, is there something else that we didn't put on the slide? So multifocal, single vision contact lenses, and then monovision. Where do you prefer to go? And this question, the answers to this one have definitely evolved over the years. And as I said, this is the third of 3 webinar sessions that we've done. We had several hundred people along last night. We had around about 100 along this morning. and we're up getting near 100 again this afternoon. And yes, very similar pattern. So it's great to see that many practitioners are favouring multifocal contact lenses these days. Used to get about a 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 split for those ABC options. Now, we're not judging anybody who wants to rely on monovision. It can certainly be very successful, and obviously, I dare say all of you are using all of these with different patients. Okay, so look, thanks for doing that. We really appreciate it. It's not often that we get a chance to get sort of good quality feedback from Australian audiences, because there aren't that many formal sources of survey information. This really helps us understand the market, and I hope it helps you. So in terms of the opportunity for this product, when we think about presbyopes, well, as we know, it's an awkward stage, isn't it? And I'm always reminded of a great colleague of mine who used to work for us, Pete, and I remember him saying, with great sincerity once, he said, the worst thing about being 50 is being presbyopic. The great thing is having grandchildren, but the worst thing is being presbyopic. And it's such a nuisance, isn't it? It can be such a nuisance. And we've always got these sort of situations these days. We want to see mobile phones. We want to do a million different things with our vision. And the spectacle lens guys have done a great job. They're probably feeling very comfortable with what they've done. But nonetheless, the ultimate flexibility and freedom that contact lenses can provide, we think, is still, a really powerful option for many presbyopes. And as the polling showed, so do you. So is this the largest opportunity in the optical market? It could well be, simply by virtue of the fact that there are so many presbyopes and so few of them wearing contact lenses. So if we believe that a lot of them would benefit, then there's a great opportunity. Of course, it always sounds like, if you haven't fitted many of this sort of patient with contact lenses before, it sounds like, well, could it get more complicated? Torics are pretty straightforward, but they're not single vision. Multifocals can be more complicated. So you put the two together, surely what we're talking about here is a very complicated proposition. But as you'll see, it's not if you go about things in a systematic manner. And one of the key things to realise here is this is where it takes, in some cases, perhaps just a little change of mindset over when you're fitting a non-presbyopic patient and you're kind of thinking, do I fit a toric or do I stay with single vision? Because with these presbyopes, as we've seen, vision is the reason, or visual acuity is the main reason that drives any dropout or any failure that may occur. So that's the thing we really want to be focused on, more so than with non-presbyopes. And therefore, basic optics, making sure we correct every last bit of correctable refractive error is only going to be helpful. As it happens, as we've said, visual acuity is the potential stumbling block. Most sills are small, so even when we're putting a cylindrical correction in with a multifocal design, the basics don't change. That quite often what we're fitting is an 0.75 or a 125 sill. That's nearly 60% of all the astigmats out there can be catered for with those powers. And old rule of thumb, 10 degrees mislocation only induces 1/3 of the prescribed sill power. So if you're prescribing an 0.75 sill and it's 10 degrees off, the patient is still much better off than if you hadn't prescribed it, because you've only induced 1/4 of a diopter of residual astigmatism. And if you're using a reliable, excellent toric design, need I say more, and we're talking about one today, then your chances of success are even greater. So that's really the attitude I think you need to bring to this, is when you see anything that looks even vaguely like an 0.75 sill or more, you want to really be looking to correct that with a product like this. Okay, so maths, there are 6.2 million presbyopes aged 45, or people aged 45 to 64 in Australia. Research by Graham Young and Anna Sully tells us that about 35% of those will have at least an 0.75 sill. That nets out to 2.2 million people. If you do the same calculation for New Zealand, you end up with about 440,000 Kiwis who are 45 to 64, presbyopic, and have sufficient astigmatism to warrant correction. So lots of opportunities. I sort of was mucking around with my calculator, and it sort of nets out as about 800 to 1,000 for every optical practice across the two countries. This group of people, of course, would be remiss not to mention something economic, even though it's tough times this year. But if we're looking at a gilded group or a demographic, it's this one, really the over 45s or so, and even really the over 50s. They have the highest household income. They have more assets than everybody else. And importantly, they tend to spend their income, which is obviously an interesting thing. They're not saving it. And so, you know, they are a great group to deal with in terms of if you can attract their attention and bring real benefits to them, they're more likely to be able to afford it than younger patients. And it leads me on to really the idea that a product like this can be a cornerstone of building a somewhat differentiated contact lens business, and with it, a differentiated optical practice. Because one way that I've seen over the years in different countries that people have gone about building a growing contact lens business without necessarily chasing too hard after what we might see the routine patients, the younger spherical patients in their 20s and 30s, is to fit the patients who we might say require a little bit more time, a bit more knowledge about fitting and specialist products such as this one, and with that, continuity of care. So if you can provide all of those things and target your patient groups accordingly, you really can fit quite a lot of people without necessarily having lots of what we might call conventional contact lens wearers, either younger spherical single vision patients. And if we think about it, presbyopes are definitely the largest one of those groups who would we could describe as fitting into that category. Children, myopia management definitely would be another, and really anybody with a more complex prescription falls into this category too. And we think, you know, with these sorts of patient groups, you're more likely to get, you know, joy and everlasting gratitude and hopefully loyalty that comes out of that, by being able to bring them to contact lens wear when they thought perhaps they otherwise wouldn't have been able to do it. Our portfolio is pretty well set up to help you do that. For presbyopia, we have a multitude of options. Myopia management, of course, we have our MySight product. And for higher prescriptions, we have the Biofinity XR Sphere and XR Toric, which really give you the capability to fit a very wide range of prescriptions indeed. And tonight's product, or this afternoon's product, Biofinity Toric multifocal, really fits into that category too, because not only is it correcting presbyopia, but as you'll see, we've got a very wide range of parameters available for you. So in terms of product specifications, as I've hinted at, or as you would have appreciated, we're bringing together three technologies here that are particularly important for the success of the product. The optimized toric lens geometry is what produces that very reliable, stable vision in our Biofinity toric product. It's also the same design technology that we use with MyDay toric and our Care toric 2 weekly lens. The balanced progressive technology was originally launched with our ProClear multifocal monthly lens way back in the early 2000s. It is, of course, in our ProClear multifocal toric as well. So that's the one constant across the two products. But what we do have is the optimized toric lens geometry design, which is not in ProClear multifocal toric. So it has one of our older toric designs. And of course, we're using our Aquaform technology, or our Biofinity material, to bring all the benefits of a very high decay, low modulus silicon hydrogel material. In terms of what we have for specifications, the sphere powers go to plus or minus 10. So you pick up a lot of prescriptions there. The cils, we treat you to 0.75 to 575 diopters of sil and 0.50 steps. In terms of axes, 5 degree steps around the clock, and that even applies to the low cils, so you can be very precise with your prescribing with this product. Add powers, you have 4 of those, which match what we have with our Biofinity multifocal product. So the 150, 250. The multifocal design is our balanced progressive technology that we'll review a little bit later for those of you who are rusty on that or new to it. The orientation mark on the lens, it's a single line at 6 o'clock. So in that respect, it does look the same as our Biofinity toric lens. It's an 8/7-14/5 base curve and diameter combination, and the material is our Comfilcon A Biofinity material with a water content of 48. A modulus of 0.75, the permeability and transmissibility values are there, 128 and 116. Light blue handling tint as always. The wearing modality, same as all our Biofinity branded lenses. which means monthly replacement, and you have the option of prescribing on a daily wear, flexible wear, or up to 29 nights continuous wear if you should think that that's appropriate in your professional judgment for the patient. The pack size, 6 packs and single lens trials. That adds up to over 200,000 combinations, so that should keep most patients sorted, we hope. And they are made to order. So there is a lead time, 10 to 15 working days. We'd like to say worth waiting for, of course. And when is all this available? Pretty soon, next week, next Tuesday, the 7th of July. Now, I would say the manufacturing method for this product is the same as for all of our Biofinity products. So that is, it's a fully molded lens. And in that respect, this is something quite unusual and quite remarkable. It is customized molding. So our ProClear multifocal toric lens is actually a lathe cut product, but this is a fully molded lens. And molding, of course, is the most consistent manufacturing method for contact lenses. So you can expect really the same levels of consistency and reproducibility with this product as you would with a Biofinity sphere, for example. And that's another reason why we think you're going to have really good results when you use this product. So on that note, I'll now pass across to my colleague, Julia, and she's going to talk to you about the material technology that drives the success of this product in terms of comfort and so on. So Jules, if you would like to take over the presentation at this point.
Thanks, Joe. Did you want to take yourself off camera before you pass me the controls?
That's a good idea. We don't really want to have two faces.
Okay, thank you. All right, good afternoon, everyone. So by material technology, we are, of course, referring to aquaform technology, which is found in all Biofinity lenses. So what is the science behind aquaform technology? We have these long silicon chains that are represented by those purple tubes on the picture on the left, as well as that molecular structure at the bottom. And these optimize oxygen transmissibility, helping the eye stay clear, white, and healthy. Now, to these long silicon chains, we then bond hydrophilic groups. And this enables the material to attract and retain moisture, making the lens inherently wettable. So this means there's no need for wetting agents or surface treatments, and it still ensures a comfortable lens wearing experience. Now, the long silicon chains are so efficient at transporting oxygen through the lens that less silicon is needed. And so knowing that silicon can make a contact lens rigid, using less silicon results in this optimum modulus. It enhances comfort, but it also allows us to fit a larger range of eyes. And so we do all this without compromising the decay. Now, there can often be a trade-off in silicon hydrogel lenses between decay and water content. So usually the higher the decay, the higher the silicon content, and silicon being hydrophobic means that we can't put as much water into the material. And you can see on the graph there that the Biofinity is in its own category, so it really breaks that relationship. We're able to achieve a high decay without having to reduce the water content. Similarly, there can often be a trade-off between decay and modulus. So again, the higher the decay, the more silicon there is in the material, and therefore the higher the modulus. The Biofinity material breaks that relationship. We're able to achieve this high decay levels even for continuous wear without having the lenses being overly rigid. So we're just maintaining that optimum modulus. And I'm going to pass you back to Joe to talk about the lens design technologies.
Thanks, Jules. I found a light. I'm doing this from my house, and it all went dark suddenly. That's Brisbane for you. No dusk. We just go from sunshine to blackness. And lens design. Let's have a look at what we have here for you. So in terms of bringing the two designs together, the optimized toric lens geometry has features on both the back and the front surfaces of the lens. The balanced progressive technology of the multifocal is all on front. So let's just have a look at optimized toric lens geometry and what that means. So where does all the stability come from? It comes from a few things, but firstly on the back surface, the only real feature we have there is the toric optic zone. You might think that's reasonably boring, but it does actually have a pretty important part to play in that by optimizing the size of that, we minimize the chances of any interference in vision coming from something like flare. We do that with the optic zones generally on our Biofinity toric lenses too. It's one of the reasons that they are so successful, is they are giving you a little bit more room with optic zones to get better quality of vision as well as stability. So that's on the back surface. Now, if we think about the lens as a whole and the front surface, what we have, what we call uniform horizontal iso thickness. What that means is the lens is very symmetrical. Now, this is a ballast type design, so the superior portion of the lens is thinner than the inferior, but that's done in a very symmetrical, very controlled way so that the lid-lens interaction is very consistent. And indeed, even across this, really mammoth range of prescriptions that we see here, let alone what we see in our Biofinity Toric XR as well, the degree or the amount of stabilization remains constant. So that as you change sill, sphere, axis, you're not interfering with the fundamental stability features of the lens. And that's one of the reasons why this product is so easy to use and consistent. So you don't have situations where you need to swing the sill a bit and suddenly the axis or the location or the rotation of the lens has changed as well. So that's really our optimized toric lens geometry, and any of you who are regular users of it, whether it be in the three lenses that I mentioned earlier, will know that it's extremely reliable. The balanced progressive technology is quite unique, of course. We think more or less the only major option which has two designs within the one product. So we have our so-called D lens design, which is a center distance design, and our N lens design, which is center near. So what does that mean? Each lens corrects all ranges of vision, so distance, intermediate, and near. And the way the D lens does that is at the center of the lens, we have a spherical zone of power, which is purely the distance vision. So that would be very much the same as if it was a single vision lens. Surrounding that is an aspheric concentric zone, taking the power from the distance to the near power. And so that aspheric intermediate zone is there to correct intermediate ranges of vision. And then we have a final concentric zone of spherical power, which is incorporating the near ad. So that's the D lens. Just the converse situation with the N lens. So we really just swap the distance, and near spherical powers around. So we now have near power at the center of the lens, an aspheric transition zone, and then a concentric zone of spherical distance power. So this gives you really the opportunity to fine-tune things. Jules will take you through the fitting of the product very shortly. But one of the reasons why this product is successful is simply because you are able to tailor design to the patient's visual needs. So while we have conventional ways of fitting this lens, which means that most people can be made successful, there are some unconventional approaches too that I see people using, which are only possible by the fact that you've got these two different designs. So optimized toric lens geometry, balanced progressive technology, that gives you really the design advantage. And in the case of this lens, the optimized toric lens geometry is new compared with the ProClear multifocal toric. The balanced progressive technology is a consistent optical approach. So I will now hand back to Jules, and she's going to talk to you about the fitting process.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Okay, so before we get into the fitting process, let's think about who we want to be fitting. So the obvious answer is astigmatic presbyopes. But if we think about more specific groups of patients, we want to be fitting existing toric lens wearers entering into early presbyopia. So this group of patients is in particular danger of dropping out of contact lenses if they can't find a satisfactory solution to their vision problems, and often resort to wearing progressive spectacles full time. So if we want to be able to keep these patients in contact lenses, this is the ideal product to do so with. We also want to consider those presbyopes wearing single vision toric contact lenses, whether they're distance only, so these people might be wearing them for specific activities, or they might be putting up with over specs. Or we also want to consider those wearing monovision who are not 100% satisfied with their vision. And I find it's particularly those going into their 50s where their ads getting up to 150 and over, where it becomes increasingly difficult to satisfy both near and intermediate vision requirements. So these people are also going to benefit from being fitted with a toric multifocal lens. What about the existing multifocal contact lens wearers with uncorrected seals? Now, even if it's a low seal, 050, 075, correcting the seals could be the difference between an occasional contact lens wearer or full-time wearer, or it may be the difference between full independence from spectacles and having to put on over specs to correct the seal sometimes. So in actual fact, when you do get a patient with lower seals, you may want to consider reaching for the toric multifocal lens option instead, rather than a spherical multifocal option. And because correcting the seals will maximize your chances of success, as Joe has highlighted before. And of course, those wearing Proclear multifocal toric lenses. So we want to give them the benefits of wearing a higher decay material. Now, all these people are existing contact lens wearers, but we really want to think outside of that. So we want to be thinking about all astigmatic presbyopes. And as Joe had said before, there's a lot of them out there. So this is a huge opportunity for you to grow your contact lens business with this product. Now, many of you will be familiar with OptiExpert. For those of you who aren't, this is an app that you can download from the App Store or Google Play. You can also use it on your web browser via the website. And all you need to do is put in the spectacle prescription, vertex distance, the lens modality, and it will give you the exact trial lens power recommendations and the products available. Now, in a matter of weeks, we are going to be rolling out an update to this app. And so you may notice, if you have it on your phone already, that it features a new look. There's a couple of shortcuts added to the calculator. And most importantly, it's going to have Biofinity Toric Multifocal added to the range of products. In a recent study involving 27 astigmatic presbyopes, we found that 93% of trial lenses were able to be dispensed at the initial fitting without having to adjust the power or the axis based on OptiExpert recommendations. So you can use this tool with the confidence that it is going to result in a high success rate for the majority of your patients. Now, we're going to use a case study to illustrate how we fit the product. And I'd like to also share with you some clinical tips that I think will increase your chances of success, and this really applies to all multifocal contact lens fittings. So we have Jason here. He's 48 years old. He is a marketing manager, so a typical day for him would be looking at his computer screen for long periods of time, but as well as going to meetings with colleagues. Now, he's recently found that he's needed to enlarge the text on his mobile. He enjoys fishing and he's having troubles tying the fishing lure. He's currently wearing single vision distance spectacles and having to remove them to read, being a myope, and he's never worn contact lenses before. Now, at this first appointment, I think it's really important to discuss with your patient what they want to get out of the contact lenses. So do they want to wear it part-time, full-time? Is it for any specific activities? And what are the visual demands for those activities? Now, it's important to establish, I think, 1 to 2 visual goals to kind of hone in on those questions. And so with Jason, what we've decided is we want him to be able to be comfortable seeing all his digital devices, particularly at work. We also want to achieve comfortable driving vision as well with those contact lenses. Now, these 2 goals you could pretty much apply to all the patients that you would see. So we're going to establish a bonus goal, better clarity looking at his fishing lures. So if we can achieve that, then we're going to have one very happy patient on our hands. Now, the language that we use with our patients is important as well when it comes to any multifocal contact lens fitting. So rather than saying something to Jason like, well, these contact lenses won't be as good as your glasses, we just want to say something along the lines of, okay, the vision in your new contact lenses is going to feel a little bit different. Let your eyes and brain adapt over the next 2 weeks and it will improve. I'm going to aim to free you from full-time glasses, but there will be times where you need to put some over specs to see tiny print. And so that just sets up expectations, but in a positive way, but we're not over-promising either. Now, because the lens is made to order, there is going to be a minimum of 3 visits. So this first visit is about determining what trial lens to order. So we want to start with a new refraction and then establish sensory ocular dominance. Now, rather than going off the patient's spectacles, we really want to perform a new refraction because you often find that you can push for more plus. And so in Jason's case, we find 025 less on his distance script, and of course we need to know the add. And so we find 125 add for Jason. So this is what we're going to use to base our trial lens order off. Next, we're going to determine the sensory eye dominance. Now what you see here is the sighting method, which has traditionally been used for years. But in lieu of this, we want to suggest a different method, which is the sensory method. Now, the reason for this is because multifocal contact lenses do introduce a degree of blur into the vision system. And so what we want to know is which eye has the better or less tolerance for blur. Now, there is a significant proportion of people who can have sensory dominance in one eye and sighting dominance in the other. And so the methods are really not interchangeable. So to establish sensory dominance, we put the distance script into the trial frame, get the patient to look at a distance target or 612 line, hold a loose plus 150 or plus 2 diopter trial lens and alternately fog the eye, asking the patient which is blurrier. Now, the sensory dominant eye is going to be bothered more by the fogging lens presence. So in other words, it's the eye that can't tolerate blur as well. So in Jason's case, we find that his right eye is the sensory dominant eye. So we're going to make a note of this and it will become relevant later. So step 2, we can either use OptiExpert or use a traditional method. Now, if you use OptiExpert, it's really easy. It basically gives you all the information that you need to order the trial lenses, including whether to order the D or the N. But we'll just go through the traditional method using the fitting guide. So firstly, you want to think about this as just a straight toric lens, so just ignore the add for now. So we're going to convert Jason's up-to-date refraction into the appropriate contact lens powers, adjusting the seal and axis as necessary to the nearest 5 degrees. This step is not essential because you can order the lenses empirically, but we highly recommend it, especially if you've got a Biofinity toric trial kit in the practice. And this is on the off chance that you're dealing with a really unusual cornea, which is not going to be compatible with this toric design, and this will save you an unnecessary 3-week wait. Now, we expect that Biofinity toric trial lenses are going to behave in the same way as Biofinity toric multifocal lenses. So if we can use those Biofinity toric lenses, it's going to give us a good idea of what the fit will be like, and we can also use it to make any axis adjustments at this visit if necessary. So with Jason, we're going to put these trial lenses on. Now, even if you don't have the exact power, just find some trials that are roughly close to the script, and it will still give you a really good idea. So we use the Lars or cast method to adjust the script if necessary. So in Jason's case, in the left eye, we find that it's just rotated slightly to the right by 5 degrees, and therefore we're just going to adjust that left axis from 180 to 175. Now remember that even with the low seals, you can order to the 5th degree. Next, we need to determine the add. So we simply use the spectacle add and refer to the table. So the 125 add is telling us to look at the top row. And so therefore, we're going to order +1 add for both lenses and the D design for both eyes. And as you can see, if we look back to the table, we recommend fitting 2 Ds for the lower adds. And once you get up to adds of 2 and above, this is where you switch to a D in the dominant eye and the N in the non-dominant eye. So it's 3 weeks later, Jason returns to collect his trial lenses. So we let them settle for 15 minutes. And again, we initially think about the lens as just a straight toric fit. So we want to assess the toric orientation and the general lens fit. And as I said before, we expect this to fit the same way as those Biofinity toric trial lenses did at the initial visit. Now, remembering that we adjusted Jason's left axis, so therefore when we look at the lens, we're going to expect that left trial lens to sit in that position as you see there. Next, we want to assess the vision. So we want to do this binocularly and with the lights turned up. Now, most of the time, we're going to find that the patient gets good enough vision for you to dispense the trial lenses. So if the binocular VA is 6/9 or better, we want to just dispense the lenses and schedule a follow-up in 1 to 2 weeks. And then before we let the patient go, we want to educate them on the adaptation process and just reassure them that even if it feels really funny over the first few days, keep persisting and it will get better. The other thing that I like to do is just to let the patients know to wear the lenses over consecutive days, because that's going to help with the adaptation process. So last thing we want them to do is wear them on day 1, 4, 10, or whenever they feel like it. Now, if we find that the vision is unacceptable, this is where we do perform an over-refraction. So we do this using loose trial lenses and under binocular conditions. But as I said, most of the time, you're going to find that the vision is good enough for you to simply dispense the trials. And so often you'll find you don't need to over-refract until the aftercare. So at this visit, it's best to resist making any changes because, again, we want to let that adaptation process take place. So visit 3, the aftercare. So Jason's now had his lenses for 2 weeks. Of course, we want to get some feedback off him, and this is where the visual goals will help us in our line of questioning. So we're going to ask Jason, can you see your computer screen? Can you read the text on your mobile? How's the driving vision? Have you gone fishing? Now, of course, we are going to record a binocular VA off the letter chart, but really the subjective feedback that we get from the patient is going to be much more valuable. And that feedback is what's going to help guide us as to in deciding whether we've reached that final script and whether we're ready to dispense boxes, or whether we want to tweak the powers and order new trial lenses. You may find it helpful to ask for a 1 to 10 subjective rating on specific tasks, 1 being poor and 10 being excellent. Now, if we find that there is some improvement we want to make, so say it's the distance we want to improve, we want to offer a plus or minus 0.25 diopter to the eye that results in the greatest improvement in vision. And you're going to find it's most likely the dominant eye that needs changing. And so we simply adjust the distance sphere power accordingly. There's no need to touch the seal or the axis. If we want to improve the near vision, so we want to offer a plus or minus 0.25, most of the time it's going to be plus that you find helps, to the eye that results in the greatest improvement in vision. So in this case, it's most likely going to be the non-dominant eye that you can change, and we want to adjust the distance sphere accordingly without changing the add power. Now, when you're doing these refractions, make sure you're doing them binocularly, so no need to occlude. Turn up the lights in the consulting room to simulate the real-life lighting conditions that the patient will mostly be in. Use real-life targets like street signs or the mobile. I find they're better to use than a letter chart when I'm doing the over-refraction because it just gives me a better endpoint and it simulates real life. And use loose trial lenses rather than the phoropter. Now, in Jason's case, say that say he felt that the driving and the computer vision was fine, but he did want that near clarity to be a little bit better so that he can see those fishing lures. And so what we want to do here is see how much plus we can add without compromising the distance. And so the key here is just making small adjustments. So for Jason, we find that an extra plus 0.25 in the left eye gives him better near vision without compromising the distance. And so we simply adjust the left trial lens to reflect that change, and we don't touch the ad at all. So this is a summary of the clinical tips that I've shared with you today. So at the first visit, try to set some realistic expectations, but we want to do it in a positive manner. And setting those 1 to 2 visual goals will help us with that. Maximize the plus in your up-to-date refraction. So the more plus we can incorporate in the first place into the trial lens, the greater our chances of success. Use the fogging or the blur method to assess sensory ocular dominance rather than the sighting method. Use real-life targets as well as the letter chart to do your over-refractions. And let the patient's subjective feedback guide you in deciding whether you've reached that final script. So it doesn't matter that they're not 6'6". If they're happy, you've done your job. Resist making changes at that dispensing appointment because we really want to let that patient adapt to the lenses over the next 2 weeks before you make any changes. And don't underestimate the power of just an 0.25 change. Sometimes that's all it takes to enhance the subjective vision. And when you're trying to improve the reading, we want to try and increase the plus as much as possible in the distance power before we consider changing the ad, increasing the ad. And lastly, we really want to control that trial process. We don't want to be doing aftercare after aftercare and confusing both the patient and yourself in the process. So try to limit any changes you make to the trial lenses to 2 and then stop. And those visual goals, again, will help guide you in that. Okay, so for the clinical performance, I'm going to pass you back to Joe.
Thanks, Jules. Okay, so I hope you found that really informative. Jules has always been a bit of a fan of fitting presbyopes with contact lenses, which is one of the reasons that we hired her, because we like that particular aspect of contact lenses very much. So let's start to wrap things up now. We're getting near the end. You'll be pleased to know. So in terms of the clinical performance of the product, we've carried out some studies in collaboration with some of our university partners, and here's a couple of them. And they're really set up in the same way to compare Biofinity toric multifocal with the ProClear multifocal toric lens. This first one was a non-dispensing study, so you fit the lenses to the patients, you let them settle down for a while, and then you make the usual assessments of fit, orientation, comfort, patient preference, and so on. So that's one way of benchmarking the new product versus the existing one. The second type of study is a dispensing study. So in this case, the patients do go off, in this case for 2 weeks with the contact lenses. And therefore that enables you to obviously get some longer term data, and particularly what you're looking at there, of course, is comfort data. So we've used the University of Indiana and Eurolens Research, which is a unit based within the University of Manchester, run by Philip Morgan over there in the UK, and measuring the usual aspects. So let's have a look at some of the results from that. Well, firstly, what we're very interested to find out, of course, is how does the optimized toric lens geometry in this format compare with actually our Biofinity toric lens, because we're asking you, as Jules has said, to have a look with those trials first. And how reliable is that? It's very reliable. So basically, if you think of Biofinity toric multifocal just as a toric for a moment, it performs essentially exactly the same as the single vision toric product. And essentially 9 out of 10 lenses settle within 10 degrees of the 6 o'clock position. So exactly the same really, and hence the instruction to have a look with a Biofinity toric trial lens before you go further. And as I've emphasised, the way in which this lens is made is fundamentally different, and it's going to give you the same precision and repeatability as something like our Biofinity XR toric lens with a sort of customised moulding approach. Some other highlights from those studies. In terms of vision performance, and we know how important visual acuity is to success in presbyopic patients. In this case, we are using, as I say, essentially the same optical design or multifocal design, but what's changed, of course, fundamentally is that optimized toric lens geometry, and hence we think that's what drives the results here, where more than 4 out of 5 patients prefer the vision that they're getting with the new product over the legacy lens. In terms of comfort, so this is taken after the 2-week visit, and we're looking at comfort just before the lenses are removed, which is one of the the more critical measures of comfort, so-called end of day or end of wear comfort, and significantly stronger preference for the Biofinity product and high comfort scores as you would like to see. So in conclusion, we've got these 3 proven design and material technologies now together in one product, being optimized toric lens geometry, balanced progressive technology, and the material, the Aquaform technology that Jules took you through a little earlier. In terms of performance in a fitting, in a clinical aspect, you can expect very high initial lens fitting success. In other words, our fitting protocol, whether it be through OptiExpert, enables you to have a high degree of confidence that those first trial lenses will in fact be successful for a trial. Huge range of prescription options, of course, and as I said, let's just emphasize again that the vision performance of this product, you should find it extremely good. So we've reached the point now where we can take questions. I know there have been a few coming in as we've gone along, and the way in which we tend to do this is, as I say, just feel free to use the Q&A or the chat box. Jules can see them easier than me, and we'll handle them between us, assuming we've got some. Jules.
Yes, so the first one is, can you please talk through how you do an over-refraction under binocular conditions? Okay, so I personally like to keep things simple. So say I'm trying to improve the distance, I'll get them to look at a distance target, preferably not the letter chart, but just say a street sign. I'll hold up a plus 025 trial lens and a minus 025 trial lens in my other hand, and I'll work on just their dominant eye. And so basically I'm establishing, do they want more plus or do they want more minus? So say they respond positively to the minus 025, that's when I'll get them to look at their mobile, and I just want to see whether, if I give them that minus 025 over the dominant eye, which improves the distance, is it going to then compromise their reading? And hopefully it doesn't, in which case, I'll give that extra minus 025. And I guess how much of that over-refraction you want to give, I'll base that on their subjective feedback. So if they've come in saying, oh, look, the distance vision is okay, like it's just, can it just be a little bit better? I'll try and obviously make my adjustments a little bit smaller. But if they come in saying, oh my gosh, that distance is just horrible, you're obviously looking for a bigger change to make. So then I might need to try minus 025, minus 050, and just gauge from their response and base my changes on that. So hopefully that helps.
Next question.
So the next question. Oh, yeah. So trial lenses will take up to 11 to 15 days to arrive. Yes, so 11 to 15 working days. So up to 3 weeks. And the next one is, can we please have the screen back up that had the add power selection table, top right of the screen?
Of course. we can get that. I think it's probably that one.
Yep. Yeah, so that's going to be part of the fitting guide, which will be available to everyone as both soft and hard copies. But essentially, it's 2 Ds for low ads, and then a D and an N for ads of +2 and above. Okay, now the next question is, can they wear the lenses intermittently even though you said to wear them continually initially? Yes, so I believe that it's just important during the adaptation process, but once they've adapted, then they can wear it however they want. So, of course, this can just be an occasional type lens, or it can be a full-time, just depending on what they want to get out of it. Okay, so we've got another request here. Can we put up the slide with the modulus and DK versus water content compared to the other lenses?
Well, that's going back a bit.
So that's going back a bit.
Bounce out of it here. So you're going to see behind the scenes, right? So I think that's somewhere back. Where are we? Somewhere.
Material.
So was it that one? Water content and DK, or?
Both. So maybe just hover on that one for a bit and then we'll switch to the next one. We can answer the next question in the meantime. Okay, question from Sam. Can you use Biofinity toric multifocal lenses for myopia control?
Well, Jules, you've heard me answer that one a couple of times, so yeah, you can do that, Jules.
So unfortunately, because we haven't conducted any studies for this product for the purposes of myopia control, we really cannot make any recommendations in that area. Now, for things myopia control, we always refer our colleagues to Myopia Profile, which is a website as well as a Facebook group that was started by Kate and Paul Gifford. And so there's a great source of information. So if you know, there's lots of discussion about potential off-label use of products for myopia control. So we would just recommend that you go there for further information. Okay, next question is, are you advocating AO sets as a cleaner or multi-purpose solution is okay?
The answer to that one is we test our lenses with all the major peroxide and chemical systems on the market to make sure that there's no compatibility issues. Obviously, the Biofinity material has been successfully used for over a decade, well over a decade. So it will work fine with either, and the choice is up to you. We don't make any specific recommendations regarding whether you want to go down the peroxide or the multi-purpose solution path.
Okay, let's see. A few more questions here. Is there UV protection in the lens material? Unfortunately, no. What sort of distance target should they look at for over-refraction? Give examples. So yeah, I just like to use a shop sign or a street sign, or you can use the letter chart. Another question, have you applied for high caps for a new item number for this product? So I believe we haven't. We would recommend you put this through as a multifocal disposable lens.
Yes, it's a lens principally for presbyopes, and they happen to have astigmatism, as do many presbyopes. Okay, Jules, we're up on time there, so unless there's one last question. Okay, so if there are any latecomers with questions, we'll get back to you through email. So it just remains for me to say a couple of things before we go. And before you go, if you like our webinars, we hope you do. In 2 weeks' time, we've got a real treat for you. Tuesday, the 14th of July, 7 o'clock in the evening, one of the most acclaimed researchers and educators in the world of contact lenses, Professor Lyndon Jones from the University of Waterloo. He's kindly agreed to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, Canadian time or Toronto time, to talk to us about contact lens non-compliance and what can be done about it. So nobody better qualified to talk about this than Lyndon, a remarkable contributor to our understanding of all aspects of contact lenses over a long period of time. So I hope you will come along to that. You'll be getting emails about that very soon for our latest webinar with a star. When we close, those of you on a desktop will see you will jump to an external site instruction such as this one. Just click on that link. It's quite safe, and that will give you an opportunity to go in and fill in the usual survey questions regarding the quality of the material that you've just listened to and seen, as well as answering multiple choice questions if you're looking to collect that extra CPD point in the case of Australian optometrists. My colleague Jessie is also posting the link. You can click on that. That's another way of getting there. And fear not, if nothing works, we'll be sending you an email tomorrow with all the information, so that you won't miss out on getting your certificate of attendance or being able to complete the multiple choice questions. So on that note, I'll just say thank you again for giving us time this afternoon, stroke evening, depending on where you are. And we've got people ranging from Perth to New Zealand. And I would like to thank also my colleagues in the control room. We've got Jessie, we've got Shannon, we might even have Mel there, I'm not sure. And of course, thanks Jules for helping with the presentation. We appreciate your support, and good luck, take care, stay safe. Bye now.